I spent years in politics, and I crossed paths with a lot of self-serving politicians on both sides of the aisle. No surprise there. Not much shocks me anymore, when lawmakers open their mouths. But recently, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia managed to drop my jaw down to my feet. Senator Tim said, quote, "The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from government, but come from the Creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or from our government is extremely troubling." Now, folks, at first blush, you might think, what's the big deal? Tim Kaine doesn't believe our rights come from God, so what? Oh, my friends, it's a huge deal. If Senator Tim is right, everyone, even atheists, are in trouble. Let me begin this conversation by using Senator Tim's exact same method of deduction to prove the opposite case is also true. The notion that rights don't come from the Creator but from laws and from government, that's what the North Korean government believes. So the statement that our rights do not come from the Creator is extremely troubling. Now then, using the Senator Tim method of deduction, I just proved the exact opposite conclusion simply by replacing Iran with North Korea. And actually, I proved nothing and neither did Tim. One example proves absolutely nothing. Don't ever fall for that deceitful sleight of hand. Now, during my college days, there was a sociology professor who used the same misleading trick. She would state her thesis and then offer one example as proof, just like Senator Tim did. Now, folks, to be honest, behind her back, we mockingly summed up her method of deduction as, all Indians walk in single file. At least the one I saw did. You see, only simpletons fall for such pig slop. But Senator Tim's assertion begs the question, where do rights come from, God or government? Now, before you answer that, let me give you a couple things to chew on. This is Brad Bright. Welcome to the God is Issue podcast, where I show how God is the issue in every issue. Why? Because we can trace all our human problems to our view of God. Now, folks, if you find this podcast helpful, please remember to like and subscribe. And when subscribing, don't forget to click on the bell so you'll be notified whenever I post a new podcast. Now then, to answer the question, where do rights come from? We need to understand what government is. Once you fully absorb that, Senator Tim's assertion should make your blood run cold. Now, imagine with me for a moment the U.S. government. What does it look like? What do you see in your mind's eye? Anything? Probably just some gray, shapeless entity, right? Or maybe you see the U.S. Capitol building. Do you know what I see? I see Donald Trump. I see Nancy Pelosi. I see Adam Schiff, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. The government is not a building or a place. It's people, specifically politicians, bureaucrats, and lawyers wearing black robes. Now do you understand on a gut level why our founding fathers set up a system of checks and balances? Now, I want you to imagine what rights might come from that group of folks. Now remember, one of them even labeled a whole block of the American people deplorables. I want you to look closely at their faces. Look into their eyes. Can you see the problem with Senator Tim alleging that rights, your rights, come from government, from politicians, bureaucrats, and lawyers? Now, if rights come from politicians, bureaucrats, and lawyers, then your rights are only as safe as the integrity of the politicians and lawyers controlling the government. Now, there's a saying, and you've probably heard it, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you'd ever worked on Capitol Hill like I have, you know the truth of that statement. May God save us all from politicians and bureaucrats who imagine that our rights come from them. You see, government should help protect our God-given rights, but rights don't come from government, as Senator Tim alleged from the Senate floor. Rights come from the Creator. See, laws and government at best simply help ensure and delineate how those rights apply to everyday life. For instance, our unalienable God-given right to liberty implies we should be free to worship or not worship as we choose. It implies we should have the right to free association and free speech. Our unalienable right to life implies we should be able to protect ourselves and our families and be given a fair and impartial trial when accused, of a capital crime. The fact that we are all created equal in God's image means that no one is above the law. You see, those derivative rights and many others still come from God, not government. Government and law simply interpret them for the current historical and cultural context. But the rights themselves come from God. Even Senator Tim finally admitted that this, when he tried to later walk back his initial statement by saying, rights are essentially meaningless unless they are protected by law. That's what he said when he walked back his statement. Now, that's not at all the same thing as saying that they come from law. The role of law and government is to implement and protect our God-given rights, not to grant them. See, the problem comes when humans try to usurp or twist God's role, thinking that they are the source of your rights. Whether it's a dictator in Honduras, King George in Britain, or a self-serving U.S. president, senator, or congressman. But folks, here's the scariest part. Any rights that come from government can be taken away by government. Senator Tim never mentioned that dirty little secret, did he? Furthermore, if the government can take away rights, then are they really rights at all? No. They're nothing more than privileges, much like your driver's license granted by politicians and bureaucrats. Calling such things rights is no less delusional than a man calling himself a woman. So folks, all rights come from God. Government's role, that is the job of politicians, is to implement and protect those rights within the current cultural context. Once we start thinking that rights come from politicians, from government, we open ourselves up to incredible tyranny. You see, that's what our founding fathers understood, and what Senator Tim doesn't seem to get. A right that comes from government is only as good as the government behind it, and a government is only as good as the politicians who run it. If that doesn't scare you, at least a little, then I know one thing for sure: you don't listen to the evening news. See, God is the only sure foundation for your rights. If God is the source of your rights, then it makes it much harder for politicians to take them from you. But any rights that come from government can legitimately be taken away by government. So the next time someone like Senator Tim tells you that our rights come from government, simply respond, okay. If our rights come from government, that is from politicians like Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden, then God save us all. They'll get the point. Now, here's what I hope you'll do in the future. Give the word government a face, a real face that your listener can picture in his or her mind. Folks on the far left fear Donald Trump. Folks on the far right fear Nancy Pelosi. And everyone now knows that Joe Biden was mentally impaired by the end of his presidency. Help your listener to feel the consequences of their statement by putting a person's face on government, a face they instinctively fear. But then finish by saying, that's why rights must come from God, at least if they're really rights. God is the issue in every issue, especially the issue of where human rights come from. This is Brad Bright. Thanks for joining me today, and God bless.